Okay, well, it looks like we've got folks joining and some folks may join a little bit later, and that's great too, but let's go ahead and get started this morning. My name is Corin Tucker and I'm the marketing director for Bell. So welcome to our webinar. Um, and today's webinar is Transforming the Future of Therapeutics for Parkinson's Disorder. And today we have our guest, Dr. Allison C. Waters, who is the director of the laboratory at the Nash Family Center for Advanced Circuit Therapeutics at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai, as well as Mason DeLigi, who is a BS and a graduate student with Dr. Waters. And they will be giving us presentations on the promise of at-home neuromodulation to enhance sleep health in Parkinson's disease. Please go ahead and add questions to the chat, and we will have Q&A after the presentation. And I will go ahead and turn it over to our guests.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Corin. But yeah, we are a center that treats a wide variety of neurodegenerative and neurological disease, but Parkinson's is one that we've taken a lot of notice to lately, especially in regards to sleep and sleep neuromodulation. So we're really excited to kind of talk about some of the projects that we have going on. But Parkinson's disease is a really prevalent neurological disease. It's the second most common neurodegenerative disease behind Alzheimer's. It's mostly characterized by a degradation of dopaminergic neurons within the brain, and it's most commonly associated with motor symptoms such as tremor. But really importantly, and one of the most overlooked symptoms is actually sleep dysfunction. Keeping in mind that this is kind of your healthy sleep architecture modeled out on a hypnogram, we see the cyclical nature of sleep progressing throughout the night, with a lot of that non-REM sleep early in the night, transitioning towards REM sleep later in the night. But in Parkinsonian sleep, we lose a lot of these key features. You can see a lot of bounce back between sleep stages, and almost an entire loss of stage N3 deep sleep. And this is really important. N3 sleep is highly neuroprotective. It's involved in a lot of very important physiological processes. And in Parkinson's disease, this can have a lot of really massive implications. We see that in Parkinson's disease, we have this very highly intercorrelated and related kind of positive feedback loop that occurs, where sleep disruption is essentially propagated with the early phases of the disease that kind of initiated neurodegeneration in key sleep centers. But this sleep disruption only goes to further the symptomatology of Parkinson's disease, where we see further accumulation of metabolic byproducts, worsening in mood and affect, and decreases in overall cognition and executive function. And in tracking with that, we see that Parkinson's patients that have better N3 sleep actually perform better on a lot of these measures, including executive functioning, cognitive functioning. So it really stands to say that the proper treatment of Parkinson's disease cannot be achieved without being able to pay close attention to their sleep state and the proper management of their sleep hygiene. But what do we have as kind of treatment options for Parkinson's sleep disorders right now? One of the most common frontline are just non-benzodiazepine sleep aids, such as melatonin. These can be effective in helping initiate sleep, but they really don't have that long-term efficacy that we need. And they can actually further contribute to excessive daytime sleepiness that a lot of Parkinson's patients experience already. A really promising therapy is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, which really targets those behavioral interventions and helps patients achieve that improved sleep hygiene. But this treatment really doesn't have the amount of providers necessary to provide to all of those that need it, which kind of leaves us with this unmet treatment need. And this is where we kind of turn to those neuromodulative interventions, specifically TES. TES has been highly investigated in sleep physiology and beyond into a lot of neurological research. but it is very promising in terms of sleep neuromodulation. This is a study, one of the first in which oscillating direct current stimulation applied during the night showed a significant increase in deep sleep, kind of at the effect of a decrease in N1 and wake states during the night. Furthermore, other studies using personalized and alternating current stimulation parameters saw increases in sleep duration and decreases in sleep onset when applied prior to sleep, as well as increases in total sleep time and sleep efficiency in another study. And furthermore, one of the studies that really kind of drove the sleep wisp and its creation showed that the application of this alternating current stimulation could lead to this increase in both the proportion and total time of N3 deep sleep. And with our understanding of the ability to improve sleep by the application of TES, we actually see some of the alternative effects that we know are associated with sleep, wherein memory consolidation can be improved. Both of these studies implemented the use of TES in association with a declarative memory measure, and were able to show that the application of TES did increase the performance on this memory measure. And this is obviously very relevant for Parkinson's patients, where memory can be impaired in further stages of the disease. And an intervention that kind of targets this inherent sleep physiology and is able to enhance it and potentially have effects even further down the line on cognition and affect and memory could be very important to their prognosis and disease progression. But yeah, this is really where the sleep wisp comes in for us. I see it as kind of fitting in that niche of being able to be intervention that we could apply at home. A lot of these sleep interventions don't have that ability to be portable. And the majority of sleep studies where you get your important sleep physiological detail have to be done in the lab. But the implementation of the nanocomputer at the bedside and being able to interpret in real time the patient's sleep readouts and apply that TACS in real time at the bedside is very, very promising for the integrative treatment of sleep. But next steps for us, we are really just getting started, but we want to be able to roll this out in our clinical population of Parkinson's disease. We're hoping to initiate a trial of at-home TACS with the sleep wisp, where Parkinson's patients will be wearing this and will be able to, measure their sleep characteristics as they progress throughout the trial. And in the end, we'll really be able to target some of those outcome measures that we really want to be able to see with this kind of intervention. The increase in both objective and subjective sleep parameters, see if we're able to measure an increase in deep N3 sleep, and even further beyond, see if we're able to capture some of those other effects, the increases in memory, potentially even the slowing or improvement of Parkinson's symptomatology. But in summary, we really think that TES, specifically TACS, is a promising treatment option in this field. And we really want to investigate further the actual effect that we can have on slow wave sleep. But we've already done some, really preliminary testing that Dr. Rogers is going to talk more about. But we do think that this is a feasible option for an at-home rollout. But just going even beyond this trial, this kind of technology has a lot of promise in being a efficacious treatment and really being able to expand the multimodal care of sleep disorders, not just within neurological disorder populations, but within the general population. But yeah, thank you to all of our collaborators. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Waters.
This is actually Corinne's suggested title, Transforming the Future. And I thought, okay, let's transform. I have no competing financial interests to disclose, but I do want to express some big gratitude for these funding bodies that support my research, and co-PIs and PIs that help to keep the lights on. By lights on, I mean here at the Nash Family Center for Advanced Circuit Therapeutics. I'm coming at you from New York City, I'm actually looking northward at the skyline right now. I can kind of see the top of Lincoln Center. It's a gray day here in New York, the city that never sleeps. I feel like there's a tie in there I can make with the sleep talk. It's a unique center. It's really, there aren't very many centers like this in the world. What's unique about it is that it is truly a research center, but it's embedded in a neurosurgical practice. So our mandate as a consortium of laboratories is to push forward innovations, particularly in deep brain stimulation, which is neurosurgical, but we're all interested in circuit therapeutics in our sort of side projects. Of course, a mainstay clinical service in our area is deep brain stimulation for Parkinson's disease. When you think about Parkinson's disease, a movement disorder, you probably think about tremor, stiffness, maybe gait impairment. That's what you would see. This is all caused by the degradation of dopamine neurons. But we know about dopamine, right? It's a very important neurotransmitter. When we lose dopamine, we lose function in a lot of domains, psychiatric domains. And a big area where we see change is in sleep. In fact, I just looked at a study that said 97% of patients with PD have sleep dysfunction, so all of them. And 50% would qualify for diagnostic criteria for insomnia, which is a significant level of sleep dysfunction. Another important point here about sleep in PD, the overlooked aspect of sleep in PD, is that controlling for the severity of motor symptoms, it is the sleep dysfunction that predicts quality of life. So if we can get a handle on this, we can make a really big difference. The thing is, pretty much all of the neurotherapeutics that are quite effective for treating motor symptoms in PD have been designed for those daytime symptoms. And some of them may even be interfering with the with sleep and, you know, making the situation worse. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the work on the cusp of innovation there, and about some work we would like to do using the WISP in PD. Right, so the neurosurgeon that I work most closely with here, Brian Coppell, he likes to say that Parkinson's disease, oh, I can hear him talking out in the hallway right now. I'm channeling him. He likes to say PD is accelerated aging. It's actually a provocative statement, but certainly neurodegeneration is something we can all plan for. Sleep also declines as we age. Healthy, typical aging would show a decrease in waking, an increase in the amount of time waking over the course of the night, decrease in deep sleep. Your REM kind of holds about consistent. But a question would be, what if we could reverse this trend? How would that impact longevity in typical aging, and how would that impact disease progression in neurodegeneration? So I searched the web. This took me 1 second to find some kind of graphic that people would use to say, like, what is going on with me? Have I got PD? And of course, the second piece listed there is sleep problems. Every one of these kinds of checklists will point to sleep as an early marker of PD. Sleep goes wonky in PD like 10 years in advance of other symptoms. So this really underscores what I think might be a bit of a theme in the slides I put together today, which is that what we do now has such a profound impact on what we get later, years later, days later, hours later. But humans aren't very good at forecasting. So the question at hand is, how can we use the technologies we are developing to help engagement now in behaviors that will affect sleep later? So this is Dr. Jimenez Shahad. She's a neurologist director of the movement disorders and neuromodulation aspect of our center's work. She's going to join us on the line a little bit later to help field some questions. she would tell you that the treatments we provide for PD are actually very effective. They are designed, of course, for wake neurophysiology. Dopamine replacement is the main line of defense. So you're given a drug like Sinemet, which is actually carbidopa levodopa, and then through a series of chemical reactions, you end up with more dopamine, which we know also plays a role in wakefulness. So while we're treating motor symptoms in the daytime, this treatment can also interfere with falling asleep at night. And then when patients start to use the extended release tablets, there's even more trouble working with this at night. And already in our patients with PD, nighttime is a complicated, it's a complicated part of the sleep-wake cycle to navigate in a healthy way. There are a lot of confounding factors or kind of multifactorial reasons for a person being plagued with insomnia. There's the motor symptoms that are untreated will actually wake people up at night. The drug interference that I just talked about, bladder control is an issue. I haven't yet talked about REM sleep behavior disorder, which is very common in PD. It is when your brain doesn't get the cue to shut off the muscle component of your dream. So you actually act out your dream. And this appears pretty early in the disease progression and can be quite dangerous. But also, like Mason said, slightly overlooked pathology in Parkinson's disease is the sleep physiology itself, disrupted sleep architecture. So in addition to Sinemet, we tend to give sedatives, which is problematic considering that this population is at risk for all cognitive problems already and falls and instability. So as the disease progresses, the dose of the dopamine replacement has to be increased, and people end up with more side effects, and the drugs are less and less effective. So at that stage, people will come to us for what's deep brain stimulation, or DBS. DBS is a neurosurgical intervention where electrodes are placed in the basal ganglia of the brain and controlled by a computer, a pacemaker that's under the skull, under the clavicle. This is a device that people will wear in their brains for the rest of their lives. And in fact, we turn it on and we leave it on. So let me take a moment to tell you about how the mechanism of treatment efficacy with DBS. I've selected this Chen et al. Just because it happened to have some images that I thought captured the points that I wanted to make, but this is a large area of research. So the gist of the story is that we, in the motor, the basal ganglia of the brain, we have a pathological oscillation in the beta band that's associated with these motor symptoms. Deep brain stimulation implants a lead into that part of the brain, like the subthalamic nucleus, and turns on a current to interrupt that pathological beta oscillation. In order to optimize this treatment, you need to know where that pathological oscillation is so that you can inject your current or put your therapeutic lead right there. A lot of work around this and a lot of technology development, to the point where the neurosurgeon will put maybe 4 contacts around the target zone, and then the neurologist will listen in for the beta oscillation in those areas, identify the part of the target region that has the largest beta oscillation, shown here in green, and then select that as the optimal contact for treatment. And this works. In fact, the next generation DBS now comes with clinician and even client-patient interfaces that allow us to do this kind of programming. So that little kind of quick seminar in PD DBS sort of underscored how this entire treatment is designed for daytime physiology. And a question is what it's doing to the brains at night. We don't shut it off. This is a really interesting and rapidly growing area in deep brain stimulation. Here I've picked one of our publications to show you sort of where we're at. The next generation deep brain stimulation devices both record and stimulate. So in this case, when I'm recording from the subcallosal cingulate for treatment of depression, I'm looking to see if I can even acquire sleep indices off of the implanted lead. And this publication is showing that we were able to consistently collect both sleep spindles and also slow waves, and that they were somewhat informative to care. On the bottom line here, I'm showing the summary statistics. That radial plot shows when the slow waves were maximal in blue at the start of treatment and in red at the end of treatment. So you can see the slow waves, which are indicative of deep sleep, moving from sort of random places over the course of the night to earlier stages of the night when we would expect when it fits a healthy hypnogram. And those other two graphs are showing that after 6 months of DBS, we saw even more slow waves than at the start of treatment. And here I am in the two columns A and D and B and E, showing examples of 2 patients and a summary of all of our patients in C and F. Rather robust and profound changes in sleep architecture over the course of treatment that we can record off of the lead. And now the question would be, can we leverage, so exciting, can we leverage our capacity to measure sleep features off of the implanted lead to conduct research on sleep pathology in depression and the possible inputs of sleep electrophysiology to the DBS treatment mechanism. Now, the science of whether or not DBS has a positive or negative effect on sleep physiology in PD is pretty complicated, actually, because if you're having success with DBS in PD, it means you're lowering your drugs, and it means you're having a lot more activity during the day. So it's kind of hard to say whether the sleep improvements we see are because people are able to engage in their lives in other ways that are sleep enhancing. But here we have a group, Smythe et al., who has shown that they can actually classify sleep off of the lead in the subthalamic nucleus. And if they use an adaptive program where the magnitude of stimulation, so the dose of DBS, is decreased during N3 and N2 sleep, they actually get more delta wave power. That's shown in G, where the teal color, the green color is just regular DBS, and the brown color, black color is when DBS is decreased during slow wave sleep. I think maybe that'll leave the rest of that figure to you if you're interested in those innovations in sleep classification on the DBS lead. But stay tuned. This is certainly an important and growing area in neurosurgical circuit perturbation. So we would love to have a device. We would love to have a device. We would love to have a drug, right? But of course, when it comes to the treatment of insomnia, it's all about behavior change and self-awareness. We have already shown that these are very effective strategies for increasing sleep health in insomnia, which is a notorious diagnosis. But does it work for PD as well? Astonishingly well. So here I'm showing from Lebrun et al. 2019, just 15 patients with a later stage Parkinson's disease. On the y-axis, I'm showing time spent in bed. It's an important index in cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia because in CBTI, you're really focusing on sleep efficiency. You want to be working towards people having the ability to get into bed and fall asleep almost immediately, and then wake up when they want to wake up and get out of bed. So time spent in bed is a pretty important measure when we're talking about behavior. Yes, and so you can see from these squiggly lines that even up to a year out of CBTI training, people are still holding on to those treatment gains. That's pretty profound. CBTI is more complex than people think. I want to take the time to talk about this a little bit. I'm not sure who's in the audience tonight, neuroscientists or tech entrepreneurs or engineers, but it's important to me that they know what is working so that we can leverage these behavioral interventions for insights into what we need for our emerging neurotech. People always think CBTI is just about sleep hygiene, like the 20 minutes before you go to bed. Maybe I'll make myself a cup of tea. No. Much more complex than that. And maybe that complexity is an obstacle we'll be able to overcome with technology. So for example, stimulus control and sleep restriction. Stimulus control is all about how you have learned association between wakefulness and your bed, or wakefulness and your pillow. And we have to actually use basic classical conditioning programming, behavioral intervention to reprogramming those associations between your sleep environment and your ability to sleep. The sleep restriction or the buffering is more about physiologically driving more, generating more sleep drive, Sleep hygiene I just talked about. The piece overlooked often is what goes on in your head when you go to sleep. So in this area, we're focused on helping people make contact with their body without distraction and not totally freak out. This is the moment when I ask how many people in the room take their phone to bed with them. And pretty much everybody says yes. So really, when you shut your phone off or let it shut off, that is the first time potentially in the entire day that you've had contact with your body. And if you're not practiced in dealing with bodily sensations and bodily distress, including the kinds of anxious thinking that comes up, then that's going to be sleep interfering. So a big part of CBTI is on the cognitive side. Taking the time to move through this because this is where our insights are derived. The framework for CBTI is an old two-process model that still holds up because it gives us this framework for understanding very complex interaction between physiology, which is what we target with direct-to-brain treatments like drugs and modulation, and behavior. To start with, we have what we call the S drive or the sleep drive. The sleep drive is lowest in the morning, so you've just had sleep, and it increases throughout the day in a kind of linear fashion, and then you go to sleep, and then it decreases over the course of the night. Ah, Juhi's joined us. That's great. Right. Good to see you. Independent of the sleep drive, we have the circadian clock. This is a different set of cycling proteins. And in this case, it's kind of works in an opposite manner. The circadian clock drives wake state, and it is the creating a need for sleep later in the evening, and then that decreases over the course of the night. Over time, we've added a third process, which we call process W, referring to all of the ways in which we interfere with our arousal physiology. using with our thinking, with our behavior, but also with our with all the caffeine that we take on board. So an outstanding question, a very interesting area of research is how these emerging technologies will either interfere with or enhance our efforts in CBTI to coordinate between these three different systems. Maybe we need to be addressing both physiology and behavior at the same time, where behavior change is still the most powerful intervention, but a closer integration perhaps of the circuit intervention and the neurophysiology will enhance the lasting benefit of both. Now, sleep neurophysiology, the sleep circuitry is pretty well known. Every first-year med student needs to memorize their sleep-wake control circuit diagrams. We certainly see the impact of neurodegeneration in Parkinson's specifically on these regions in the brainstem. So there's no question that there is an organic basis of these sleep problems that needs to be addressed. We also recognize the engagement with brain structures and endocrine functions. But in some ways, sleep is like, the sleep wiring diagram is a little bit like breathing. We've got it all laid out. We've got the map of natural typical breathing, but we're still pretty foggy on the ways that the forebrain can assert control over breathing to adapt to the demands of the environment. And so similarly in sleep and wake cycle control, we are right on the cusp of innovation, given some new and emerging insights about cortical or forebrain control of these basic midbrain and brainstem functions. I'm going to give you an example here that really excited us. So this group in 2020 provided very compelling evidence in rodents using optogenetics that disrupted what we thought about slow wave activity in the neocortex, specifically implicating a region of the brain called the claustrum, which sits right behind the insula in regulating slow waves. You know, the going thought here is that the slow waves are initiated in the frontal lobe, but here we're getting a much more refined idea of how this feature of slow wave sleep or of deep sleep is regulated. And we took notice because just before that, Mike Fox's group, who have been innovating in these really large data sets and using AI to bring what would be lesion mapping, what would be considered lesion mapping to a whole new level. They had just reported that the claustrum was a specific predictor of Parkinsonianism in this very large sample. So now we have two pieces of evidence linking the two. And right around that time as well, Kyle Morgan at Bell came out with this report, which was using EEG source analysis to localize the onset of the slow wave. And they found this inversion point in orbital frontal and I think lateral medial temporal, which corresponds somewhat to this story, enough that we took note. And when the WISP was developed to target that region specifically, it made sense to us that would be the tech that we would use. So you see our motivation to examine the potential for deep sleep enhancement in PD and why we selected the NeuroSOM. at-home work with neurotech is so challenging. And so this is an area where we really want to be in close collaboration with our tech partners, because the potential benefit is so great, but the protocol is so tough. So we had a couple false starts, and then I just decided that I needed to put myself through it. So that boohoo on the screen is me on a summer night in Harlem. And I really regret that I didn't take a better picture, but I wore this, the WISP for 6 nights with 5 nights of stimulation, and we pushed my data to the cloud. And every day I got to look at this hypnogram that was generated using the NEAT algorithms. The top is unsmoothed and the bottom is a smooth version. So I really got my own brain at work over the night. My cursor, here's my deep sleep earlier in the night, and then or REM coming toward the end of the day or end of the night, and more waking. So a typical hypnogram. But wow, having access to this information about my sleep patterns really profoundly changed my behavior, because I don't think I was thinking too much about the part of the sleep-wake cycle when I was asleep. But of course, now I know I was quite busy. So one question we're asking with this study is whether there's convergence or divergence in the measurement types. This is pretty relevant, particularly to how we'll integrate this kind of technology with CBTI. On the y-axis there, I'm showing the number of minutes I spent in sleep over the x-axis, 6 nights. The red line is my guess, from my sleep diary, of how many minutes I was in sleep over the course of the night. And the green is what my Fitbit told me. The Fitbit is calculating sleep time, all of its indices, entirely from heart rate. And then the sleep WISP in blue is using my EEG to make these calculations. So really interesting convergence there. I noticed that I am always overestimating the amount of sleep that I'm getting. And I would be curious to see in insomnia underestimation, and whether it matters, whether an individual with insomnia can see compare their subjective sleep indices to objective sleep indices and be affected by that in any way. An important area of divergence, I think, is in REM sleep duration. So again, on the y-axis, how much time I spent in REM, and on the x-axis, the number of nights. And the Fitbit just had no idea, and didn't converge at all with the EEG measures, which is what we would need to see REM. So just an important note on using these devices. We need to know, in some cases, we're going to need to have the full EEG in order to get the index that's essential for the answer. In our case, our primary outcome measure is whether I increased the amount of time in deep sleep or N3 sleep duration. On the y-axis there. And I guess the answer is not no, which is enough to give me confidence to move forward with the trial. I was just asking Mason whether my night 2, which was a sham, was active or sham, and it was active. So it appears that overall I did get more deep sleep, in non-significant, but promising. I did think it was pretty interesting that among all the sleep indices we collected in this pilot, it was sleep efficiency and this N3 sleep duration as calculated through the EEG that shared the same shape. How to make sense of that is kind of interesting. It could be that we can't really tease apart the chicken and the egg between all the things that I was doing because I had this tech on my body and a team watching me go through it to improve my sleep efficiency, to improve my overall sleep health. But it could be a closer interaction there that would be very interesting and important to tease apart. So I think it's a pretty exciting time as a brain owner because, you know, what did I saw the things that my brain knows, but I don't know. But when I did learn what my brain knows, it changed my behavior. The thing is, I stopped tracking my sleep immediately after the pilot, because I think we still got a ways to go with gamification and reward and generating the social context to keep people engaged. But I would love to hear about anyone on the line who's doing physiological tracking and how it's helped them to make changes they wanted to make in their life, including your sleep habits. And also, how willing would you be to take on these kinds of emerging technologies? What if they were neurosurgical technologies, for example? Okay, so if you took one thing away from my talk, let it just be a reminder that the choices you make to promote your sleep health now are really an investment in your future wellness, meaning tomorrow, next week, and also 10 years from now. And in the meantime, as scientists, let's see what we can build or make to help you get a great night's sleep. All right, a big thanks to all these folks who are supporting this research at the Nash Family Center for Advanced Circuit Therapeutics, and also to all you all for joining Mason and I for a discussion about these emerging technologies. I wonder if we can continue that for a few minutes.
Absolutely. That was a wonderful presentation from you both. And we do have some questions in the chat. So the first question we have is from Dawn Tucker of Bell. Do most Parkinson's patients know about the importance of sleep to their cognitive function?
I can give you an anecdotal response to that question, Dawn, and Juhi, if you have anything to add, please do. I would say absolutely they do. They're so distressed. It's fair, anybody who's gone through a period of time in their lives when they're having trouble with sleep, or right, and then it becomes a feed-forward cycle where those sleep-related anxieties actually make it even more difficult to fall asleep the next night. But yeah.
Yeah, Allison, I don't know if you can you hear me?
Can hear you.
This is Juhi. Yeah, sorry, I came in a little bit late, but the part that I heard was certainly great. And I think just to address that question, this is definitely an issue that people with Parkinson's are tuned into. They have a number of different sleep pathologies, and the cognitive toll, the physical toll, the emotional toll of poor sleep, I think is a really still major contributor to the quality of life that patients with Parkinson's or the decline in quality of life, perhaps is a better way to put it, that patients with Parkinson's experience, and probably one that we still don't have kind of the best answer for in terms of offering remedies. So I think, you know, as I discuss these kinds of projects with my patients, certainly very interested in these types of interventions that don't necessarily require other drugs or medications that we're adding to their pill burden that can also come with other associated complications and side effects. So I think this has really got a huge potential in the Parkinson's space.
To follow up with that, we have a question about Parkinson's patients learning to use the sleep on their own at home. Is that something you think will be difficult or a challenge to overcome?
I think actually it relates to another question as well about CBTI in combination with sleep wisp therapy. Okay, so Corinne, we simply need to overcome these obstacles to at-home sleep neuromodulation and sleep assessment. The benefits are so great. There is no question, and there's work to be done. The field has been attempting at-home recording for a long time, and it's tough. It's tough. So we just have to partner with tech companies who are willing to listen to the patient's needs, and yeah, we'll have to work pretty hard to train folks to be able to use these strategies. You have to stick it all on you. There's lots to do. Yeah. But that's there's another interesting, there's sleep neuromodulation, enhancement of deep sleep with TES. That's one thing. But merely giving people access to their brainwave data, or maybe a Fitbit is enough, is so profound. And yet we haven't fully explored the extent to which using these kinds of neurotech devices can enhance CBTI, or whether it would interfere with CBTI. And I could see a way in which they could instruct each other.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a fully integrated sleep wisp with a CBTI protocol would also give our geriatric patients the scaffolding they need to be able to use the technology.
Well, it's interesting that you brought that up, because actually, so Neurosom is our partner company for Bell, and we do have what's called the virtual sleep coach that we are designing to bring these CBTI techniques to the users of sleep therapy.
Yeah.
Right. So we are listening to the feedback we're getting and realizing how critical this is to integrate, and we're coming up with a system that is holistic and that incorporates these, the CBTI training into this app that we're developing for people, so that everything it should work together for someone who's using the neuromodulation.
Yep. Holistic, multi-pronged, those are good words, and also reflect the reality of the problem. The framework that we use in CBTI, of course, has these different drives that are intermingling. They have different sets they have different physiological mechanisms that are, driving them, underpinning them. And there are different mistakes we can make to interrupt those different forces, and different ways we can intervene. CBTI, having a CBTI coach lets you kind of measure and plot your course forward in how the many different things that you can do to try to enhance your sleep.
Speaking of that, we do have another question in the chat. I'm interested to know whether sedatives used to counter the effects of the daytime medicine used to improve the daytime symptoms of PD. Do we know if these sedatives affect N3 sleep, or do they minimize N3?
Gosh, I should know the answer to that question. I know do you know the answer to that question, Katie?
Yeah, I think there are certain medications that do increase things like slow wave sleep, and I think that includes the N3 component as well. But I think the balance is, while there may be some improvements in those aspects from a physiologic standpoint, there are still some other potential side effects from the medications, or maybe excessively sedating. And so, the dose that's tolerable for a patient, that may be difficult to achieve based on some of the other issues that will arise from the medication. So I think it's still a question of achieving that right balance. How do you increase that component without the collateral? And I think those are still aspects that remain to be explored.
Yeah, TD, that's a great, you've raised a great point. Sedatives that have an impact on sleep architecture that may be problematic, but also they contribute to further daytime sleepiness, cognitive problems, and people habituate to them. This is just not, it's just not sufficient.
Mhm. We have one other question. Is the clearance of toxins such as alpha-synuclein improved with getting more deep sleep?
This is a really interesting question. So lately, a lot of the, well, not a lot, but there has been focus or attention placed on something called the glymphatic system. And the glymphatic system is a mechanism by which potentially these proteins are cleared, and there's a diurnal fluctuation to the functionality of this lymphatic system. So yeah, TBD, another line of inquiry that I think would be really interesting if we are able to develop therapies directed in this way to then demonstrate, the other downstream effects in things such as protein clearance.
In disease and wellness.
Absolutely.
And to our talks today, we didn't pitch so much on the mechanistic level of the neuromodulation intervention with TES, but certainly when we are talking when we're at neuromodulation conferences, there's a lot of debate and pretty rigorous and provocative debate about how TES and tax is impacting the brain. And some compelling evidence that in fact what it's doing is modulating the efficacy of the glymphatic system. So even though we leaned into an entrainment mechanism today in our talk, if we were really getting down into the weeds of how this neuromodulation is impacting the brain, we would begin to consider the potential that it's not neural entrainment, but it's glymphatic clearance.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool
question. Yeah. Great. Well, I think that kind of wraps it up for our questions. I just want to thank you all for a great webinar today, for all your time and your presentation. It's just really fascinating. So thank you.
Pleasure. Go Ducks.
Yep. And we'll have this available once it's edited and it's been approved. We'll have it online for folks too. So thanks so much.